Thank you for everyone for joining this morning. Hopefully, it won't be too long-winded. Usually, I like to do this in a more personal setting, but the Zoom meeting will work as well. So I'm Daniel Nicklitz. I've been a virtual CIO with TruTechnology for the last 6 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with many small and medium-sized businesses in Northeast Florida for quite some time. And as a VCIO, my job is to mitigate risk in your environment and really act as a translator between business and technology in order to work on technology initiatives and help make your business successful and keep it safe as well. So I've got a small PowerPoint slide here, Deck. I hope I don't linger too long or go too deep or put anybody to sleep on this one, but we'll get started right off the bat here. What is cybersecurity, for your business? It's just the protection of computer systems and networks from information disclosure or theft or damage. And it can even be damage to your reputation. It can be fraudulent ACH transfers. These kind of things are all in this realm of cybersecurity. We're trying to protect you from all of these different angles. And that's what it would mean to your smaller, medium-sized business. A lot of businesses that I talk to in my day-to-day when I'm working with our clients have these myths or misconceptions about cybercrime. They think, it's only done by individuals. It's some hacker in a basement, eating Cheetos or something. But cybercrime really is a big business. There's a lot of organization to it. There's entire enterprises. They treat it exactly like a business with contracts. They have people punching time clocks. It's a big deal. And they also think that cybercrime has to be complicated, right? It's somebody hacking your computer. They're spinning millions of lines of code. But a lot of it really boils down to social engineering is really the biggest attack that's the most effective. And it's really just a good old-fashioned con game that's been around for hundreds of years. They're just doing it electronically now. So, the other myth is that, I'm small and no one will target me, but that's not true. They're getting to anyone and everyone because it's extremely profitable. On that note, according to the FBI, cybercrime payments. So this is just how much they're getting paid over the last 5 years has just grown. I mean, it's over $10 billion, in the last year. And the top types of cyber-related attacks were phishing. So, these emails that you get, send money to Nigeria or, send me some money or click this link, these kind of things really drive the top of this, these cyber attacks and these vectors. And these attacks really are increasing, but they're not that complicated. I mean, it's really just a well-written email, which they're getting better with their spelling and everything. And it's getting harder and harder to tell. So as we go through this, you'll see that I'll talk about some more recent attacks and how these different attack vectors work. But just understand here that they're growing in the number of monies that they're receiving, and then also the sophistication of attacks is not that crazy. It's not like a bunch of lines of code. Interestingly enough, they also use cyber attacks for military situations. So this actually comes from a CrowdStrike global threat report. CrowdStrike is a particular tool used for cybersecurity. And it's interesting, you can actually see a spike in destructive cybersecurity attacks against the Ukraine prior to Russia's invasion. What was interesting about this one, though, is that these particular attacks weren't as effective, they said in the article, as kinetic counterparts, meaning they kind of gave up on trying to do anything through the computers and just do more conventional warfare in that case. But as we saw from the previous slide, the damages to your small business can be monetary and big indeed. So does this really affect me? This myth, is my small business really a target? Are they really going to come after me? And there's been a lot of statistics out there that, 60% of small businesses have experienced a cyber attack already in the last 12 months. 45% say they're ineffective at mitigating these attacks. And these attacks are constantly changing. It's better mousetrap, better mouse, better mousetrap, better mouse. It used to be probably 5 or 10 years ago, right? I could get up here and tell you that a good antivirus and a good firewall would protect you. And even as close as a year ago, I gave a similar talk to this. And I said, if you take anything from this talk, take away that you need MFA on your email. Like seriously, like run and do it immediately after this talk. If you don't have MFA on your email, you are a sitting duck. And now, we've seen a lot of recent cybercrime where they're even getting around MFA, and I'll talk a little bit about that on another slide. But yes, this really does target your small business, and there are things and steps you can do to prevent it, but they are getting really, really good at it. So where do these criminal businesses operate, right? If they're selling credit card numbers online, or they're selling you a package for malware where they guarantee that you'll infect 100,000 computers in the first hour, which they do, where do they operate, right? And so when you look at the web, there's a surface web that we're all familiar with. It's Google and Facebook and Wikipedia and YouTube and all of these sites that we're all used to. And then there's kind of the deep web, usually behind paywalls or behind logins. It's your banking and, medical records and membership sites and that kind of thing, because it's not really open on the web. It's behind a paywall or a login or something like that. And then there's the dark web. And down below this iceberg graphic that we see here, the dark web really is, you need specialized browsers to get to it. You can't just do it through Chrome and these kind of things. And once you get onto the dark web, they protect anonymity. So it's harder to track and trace IPs and sources and where servers exist. It's really kind of an anonymous web. And that's where most of this several criminal businesses operate and selling credit card numbers and malware. And they treat it like a business. They'll actually sign a contract with you that, hey, for X amount of dollars, we'll give you malware that we've tested against every single antivirus that's out there. And we guarantee that it's a 0-day infection that'll infect 100,000 computers in the first hour. So it really is run like a business. It is no longer just single individuals, and they are very sophisticated in their attacks. So this is kind of a snapshot from the dark web. There are a lot of dark web monitoring tools that are available now that will actually dip into this dark web and see what information is available out there. If they're selling lists of usernames and logins and passwords, you can actually pull them up and see them. And so here's actually a list of Netflix passwords. And as we can see, F. Hussein there in the middle is a big fan of the Rolling Stones, and that's his full password. Some of these are start out, but you can actually get the full password, and it's crazy. Some of these you can try. If you put in your domain name, you'll get all the emails and breaches that have happened to your domain and the passwords that are out there floating on the dark web for anybody to use. And this should also instruct you as to, you should never use the same password for multiple websites, right? I shouldn't use Rolling Stone 786 for my banking password and my Netflix password, because perhaps the bank is more secure and doesn't get hacked. But if they hack Netflix, or there's a breach there and they get a password database, they're sure as shooting going to try that email address at Bank of America or any of these other banks and just see if it sticks. See if you've used the same password in multiple locations. So a very recent attack that's ongoing right now, I don't know if everyone here is familiar with MGM Resorts. They've actually had a hack that's been going on for about a week, and they're losing about $8.4 million a day. Caesars Entertainment, the competing casino to MGM, confirmed it also detected the same breach, and they paid their ransom of $15 million, and they've avoided customer-facing disruption. So this is actually a screenshot of a sign at MGM Resorts saying that you can only use their slots with cash. Now, both of the breaches appear to be initiated through social engineering attacks. So this is, again, not a complicated attack. They didn't, hack through their firewall or do anything crazy. It was simple human engineering. They just tricked some human targets into handing over their login credentials. And we see that that's a very successful attack and a very lucrative attack for these cyber criminals. And so it's very easy, low-hanging fruit, and pays well. So the group that they think is responsible or is claiming for it right now is called Scattered Spider. And Scattered Spider's attacks primarily consist of phishing pages to capture your authentication credentials. Now, it's interesting that in these cases, MGM did have MFA on these accounts. They actually used a third-party vendor called Okta to protect their accounts. But what these phishing attacks do, that they look extremely real. So they'll send you an email with a link that says your Microsoft credentials have expired. It'll look really official. You'll click the link, And when you click the link, they'll pop up a window. And actually what they've done is proxied the actual Microsoft login. So in your window, you will see the exact Microsoft login as it is currently on their website. There's no way you can tell the difference. But they've kind of done a man in the middle there where they're intercepting anything that you put into that box. They can actually take it. And then as soon as you put in your MFA password, they can create a token on their side, which allows them to put the token into a browser and log into your email and gain access to everything in Office 365. So that kind of attack happens, and it happened at MGM. Another attack that happened, and this is something that we don't want to depend on, right? Is there honor among thieves? So recently, earlier this year, there was a ransomware attack against a children's hospital that ended up where the hackers gave the money back. It's crazy. They said that they created the attack, and that an affiliate used the attack against the kids' hospital, and then the people that created the attack and sold it to this affiliate got mad at them and said, you violated their ethics code, and said that they would fire the rogue affiliates, and they gave the key back to the hospital. Now, certainly this is, an honor among thieves kind of case where and it ended well, but certainly not something you want to depend on, that these attacker groups will give back any passwords or unencryption keys to help you out. And it's not just you. It's not just small businesses and different verticals. Here at TruTech, we're a managed service provider, and we are big, attractive targets. So the NSA even said that we make a good target because we have to be able to remote into all of our clients' machines. And so it's kind of like you get keys to 30 or 40 different clients all at once with one attack. And so we eat our own dog food. We definitely audit. We have a lot of different MFA. We even have number matching MFA, which I'll get to in another slide. And we have a bunch of different security layers that we put in place to protect our data and our clients' data from these attacks. And that's really what this is all about in cybersecurity. It's layers of security. There's no boxes that I can give you to check. I mean, sure, there's some baselines that, I hope you take away from this, which is get MFA on your email and even number matching MFA. But there's it's a journey, not a destination. There's no checklist I can give you and then you're you're safe. You have to stay vigilant and audit and align to make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect your small business and your information. So there are about five different types of cyber criminals. You can kind of classify it into these different ways. The social engineer, the spear fisher, the hacker that we were talking about, where it's complicated up front. There's even, rogue employees can, if you're not auditing and aligning, like we at TruTech, when an employee leaves, if you don't immediately disable all of their accounts, they can get back in and do some damage there as well. And then, of course, the one we hear about in the news, or the hospital case, the ransomware artist, or the MGM case, where they're putting malware on your systems and then locking them down until you pay a ransom. And so as MGM, they can't even function, where people have to use cash for their slot machines. The different vectors of attack we've talked about a little bit, and these vectors can come in many different forms. I think mostly in the last year we've seen the most come through email. There are other ways that they can do it. There are pen tests and vulnerability tests you can run against your networks and your WAN IPs and things like that. But most of it is email, because email is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. You can't shut it off, and it's very hard to deal with. There's no magic bullet or silver bullet or tool that you can do that can just make every email safe. And in addition, email typically has that human component, which can be a weak link. And so, we see, stolen credentials through emails, phishing attacks with links or attachments where you click it and then it installs the ransomware and holds your computers hostage. The other big one here to note that can be easily, protected against and mitigated is the remote desktop protocol. And so, a while back during COVID, everybody went remote. And one of the easiest ways to go remote was to enable Microsoft's remote desktop protocol. It comes with Windows, it comes with Windows servers, and it makes it easy to access your computer remotely. But however, without proper protection, VPNs and MFA and things like that you layer on top of it, it is so common and ubiquitous that hackers know to look for it. And if you haven't protected it and it's open, they can gain, actual control and access to your systems relatively easily just by, scanning your IP address for a certain port, and they know immediately that you have it. And then the only thing protecting you at that point is your Windows password. So it's important with the remote desktop protocol to make sure you're doing it over a VPN or that you're layering MFA on it. And most of the rest of these attacks come from phishing. Now, some attacks can come from unpatched systems. So if you're running, and also about MFA in general. So like I said, a year ago, I said, if you get MFA, run and get it right now, because it really does prevent a lot of the attacks. In fact, Microsoft published an article where in their Office 365, they get about 300 million fraudulent login attempts a day to Office 365 worldwide. There's just constantly hackers trying to log into everybody's Office 365 because they know that everybody uses it. It's cloud-based, and it's easy for them to just attempt and to even brute force some of these logins. So some of them are doing that. Microsoft in that same article recommends, obviously, to get MFA. And MFA, basically the multi-factor authentication, is, your username, your password, and this code, right? This little 6-digit code you may see in your Authenticator app. Hackers know this, and hackers know that, this was getting rid of a lot of their attacks. And so they've developed a new attack where they'll send you the email link that says that your Microsoft account is expiring. You'll click it. It'll pop up full Microsoft window. It'll look just like it is because they're literally proxying it from Microsoft's website. And then they'll ask you to enter in your username, your password, and your 6-digit code. Once you enter those three things into the hacker's window, they can, again, take that information, create a token, and now they can open up their own browser with your login and get full access to your emails. So in response to that, a newer form of MFA, and this is all included with Office 365, so this doesn't require any additional licensing or extra cost. It just requires getting it set up. An additional thing that Microsoft recommends now is called number matching MFA. And so in this screenshot, what you see here on the right-hand side is kind of the rectangle of the phone screen, like what you would see on your phone, whereas on the left-hand side is the browser and the login. And so in this scenario, the window that you would see before this would be your username and your password and that code, the 013760, and you would put all that in. But then after you put that in, Microsoft will immediately challenge you to enter a different number on your phone itself, on your device. So you're not entering all the information into your browser all at once to be authenticated, where the hacker could be man in the middle and stealing it. Microsoft is now saying, okay, you entered all your information here. I'm going to give you a number and you enter it on your phone. So that makes it where there's now two devices that the hacker has to be man in the middling in order to get the account information from. So what you would see on your phone on the right-hand side there is you would type in that number 83 and you would say yes. And so this number matching MFA really gets around them stealing MFA credentials. And it is kind of the I guess, to coin Will Smith and Men in Black, the new hotness, I suppose. The better mousetrap. This is the better mousetrap currently. So, if you don't have even base MFA on your email, highly recommend you run and get that immediately. And again, multi-factor authentication is just requires setup in Office 365. It doesn't require any additional tools. And then further, you'll be prompted to enable number matching, which will require you to download the Microsoft Authenticator app on your cell phone. But again, that's free as well and very easy to set up. And this will probably protect you from about 95% of the attacks here. So it's not just cyber criminals that cybersecurity is attempting to stop, or that's not the only reason we need cybersecurity. There are compliance frameworks that dictate security as well. And so in your particular business or your vertical, make sure that you understand all the compliances that you may be subject to. So I've listed a few here. I'm not going to read them all out. There's the NIST and the California Consumer Privacy Act, which may not affect us here. But in that particular one, you need to know that even if you do business at all with citizens of California, you fall under that framework according to their law. There's also the GDPR, which is similar to the California Act, in that if you even do business in Europe at all with any citizen, then you fall under that regulation. One of the more interesting regulations that we're dealing with a lot recently is the CMMC down there, second from the bottom, and that's this cybersecurity maturity model that is being put out by the Department of Defense. It's going to be replacing their DFARS requirement, and basically, if you're doing any kind of contract work, construction even or whatever with the government, you will have to have CMMC levels. There's levels 1 through 3. And you'll have to comply with them to even bid on contracts. And so that's coming down the line. They're putting it into place now. They've changed it a little bit, and there's a lot of vagaries to it. But essentially, it's not just, hey, I have these tools in place, but it's more of a philosophy for my business that I'm taking active steps, and we practice cybersecurity every day, and we have policies and procedures written down on our side in our business that tell us what to do in case we have certain attacks, as well as we have these tools in place. So it's really that one. A lot of these compliance frameworks require more than just the IT side. They require some policy changes on the business side as well, some written policy to make sure that you're compliant. We also need to protect against identity theft and even reputation harm. So in particular with HIPAA, there's actually a HIPAA wall of shame. And so this is kind of interesting. You can actually put it into Google, type in HIPAA wall of shame, and it will come up with all of the breaches, and it will list your business out by name. Now, again, this just just affects healthcare providers. But it's easy to see here that you get called out, and they actually tell you the type of breach, when it happened, and how many individuals are affected. So, reputation harm is another thing that cybersecurity can protect you against. So, looking forward in cybersecurity. So I think everybody's heard a lot of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. That's been worked into several cybersecurity tools for the last year, essentially allowing it to digest huge amounts of data sets, like that CrowdStrike infographic that I put up of the Russia and Ukraine, just seeing all these different attacks and then kind of coalescing it into a bigger picture of what's going on. So AI, though, however, can also be a tool for the cyber criminals. When they use large language models like ChatGPT, it helps them not only write the malicious code, but they can actually have it write, just regular English language emails that aren't misspelled and maybe don't have all the disadvantages of that. That English is not the hacker's first language, and he can have ChatGPT basically write the entire email so it looks legit and sounds good, and it's spelled correctly, and there's hardly any telltale signs in it. There's also some issues with quantum computers coming up, that these are computers that don't operate in the 0 to 1 space. It's 0 and everything in between. And these are still very young. These are harder to come out with, but they're saying that in the security realm, that all of our codes, so there's like an RSA code. So when you go to an HTTPS site and it's secured by a certain level of encryption, right? And some of these encryptions can be, 248-bit numbers. And the reason that we protect them with that is because it takes a regular computer millions of years to crack that if it was just brute forcing the password. But quantum computers, they're saying, could be able to break these in hours, even the current encryption that's in place. So just something on the horizon. It's not something that's hugely in use right now, not something that we've seen, but it is coming. So this is the cartoon that I like to present, because the easy answer to all of this, right, is that you just unplug your computers, but businesses can't really operate that way. And the other thing that I like about this cartoon is that it shows that most of these attacks are not really that complicated. It's kind of making a mockery of that, in that he's saying, in the first panel, "Oh no, I'm being hacked," and then the hacker is saying, "After 10 years of programming, I finally perfected a program." And of course, he just unplugs his computer and he's safe. So, we can't operate our businesses that way. We have to be online. We have to have the internet, and we have to have our computers. And so we have to take the steps and create a philosophy and a mindset to secure and mitigate these risks. And again, like I said with the cartoon, these hackers aren't taking 10 years of programs. They don't want to wait that timeline of 10 years to make the payoff. It's so much easier to spam out a bunch of emails with links, and I'll get a few clicks and, get 50,000 a click. And I don't, even if I get a 1% rate, I'm making lots of money, and it's real easy, and I don't have to do any hard work for it. So we're seeing, like I said, a lot of email attacks and phishing and social engineering attacks. So where do you start, right? Like this, for small businesses, there's a lot going on. It's changing all the time. Like I said, a year ago, I said MFA, and now you got to have MFA with number matching. How do I get my handle on this, right? And so this isn't really just an IT problem. That's the first step. It is a philosophy. It's a policy and procedure in your business. It's educating your end users, phishing and training and simulation and some, training videos on that. It's really an everyone problem. There's no tools or silver bullets that I can give you that'll make you 100% safe. Even as an IT professional, there's nothing we can do. There's all kinds of different vectors. So we have to be aware and keep track of those. So, know where you stand and what you need to protect. And you can do this through some tools and exercises, some gap identification. You can use the security frameworks that we talked about as a guide. So obviously in those particular industries with those frameworks, they've gone through and said, hey, we in our industry, we know we handle this kind of data typically, in the typical business in our industry, handles it in these ways and this kind of thing. And so they set up these frameworks, like, HIPAA just knows about medical records and that how doctors communicate them, and they set up a framework around it to make suggestions of ways you can improve your security. There's also risk assessments and vulnerability scans and pen testing that you can do all through third parties, or other IT companies can help you do this. So it's really kind of identify, what is the information I need to protect, and then identify also, what am I doing currently to protect it, and where am I vulnerable in these scenarios, and how can I plug the gap, so to speak. It's interesting that I have we had a story from a client where they had an email, and we were talking to them about putting MFA on all of their emails, and the client was reluctant in that. They said, I don't want MFAs on the emails because it adds another step for my users to log in, and it's hard for me to train them, and there's a lot of them, and it would just be really disruptive to our business flow. So we spoke to him, and we said, hey, why don't you just put it on your account itself? You're the CFO, just so you can try it out and see how it works and see if it's as disruptive as you think it is. And it ends up that he was working with his bookkeeper, and his bookkeeper's account gets attacked. They were able to get in. But what they did was they don't make themselves known immediately when they get in. They sit in your email for a while, and they just kind of read it. They don't make themselves known. They don't lock you out. They don't pop up a ransom screen or anything to let you know they're there. And they just kind of watch. They watch who you're making payments to, who you're emailing to, who your vendors are. And they realize that there's another vendor. They then go out and register a website with a domain name that's very similar to the vendor. I think they replaced a W with 2 V's in the domain name. And so they were able to create an email there and perpetrate as if they were the vendor, and then get this particular user to change the ACH deposit information, all via email, by the way, and then make the deposit to the wrong place. Now, had MFA been in place for this particular user, they wouldn't have gotten access to the email in the first place to even find out who the vendor was and how to make these payments. So MFA is important, and a lot of these hacks, like I said, are not complicated. They just want to get in, read your email. They can fake signatures. They'll copy signatures off. They can create new domain names that look very similar, so it's hard to tell. A good rule of thumb, and even your cyber insurance policies will tell you this, is that when you are making payments or ACH transfers, is pick up the phone. and call. So if your vendor that you've worked with for a long time is suddenly changing their bank account information, pick up the phone and call them and say, is this legit? It's a good way, low-tech way, easy way to get around that. And so we've talked a little bit before too, build the risk awareness in your team. It's kind of this philosophy for your business. So the weakest link in your security is just basic human error. It's easy. Things get busy during the day. Your employees are working hard, and it's just one click or one mistake, or I'm just going to change this ACH number, and then away you go, and the damage has been done. The last step, the last line of defense after IT tools, and mitigating risk, and this philosophy of risk awareness in your team is cybersecurity insurance. And if you, again, like MFA, if you do not have cybersecurity insurance, I recommend that you take a look at that immediately, because it could be a lifesaver in many businesses. So this is a layered approach. It's a journey, not a destination. You want to identify the data that you have that you need to protect, identify how you are currently protecting it and what you can do better. It's an ongoing process. It's just like building a house. You put on security doors, maybe windows and locks and camera fences and a safe or security system. And these need to be monitored and maintained, right? Because even though you have all these tools in place, if no one's looking at the logs or no one's digesting the alerts that are being sent in, you don't know that you have an issue. And like I said, these cyber criminals like to hide in your email. They don't like to let themselves be known, so that they can leverage that against you. So, looking at these public frameworks, NIST and CIS, TruTech actually, we have a kind of a different procedure. We actually took about 250 questions or so, and we took it from these frameworks. So we said, hey, does your APC have 45 minutes of runtime? Is there only 2 admins in your Office 365 account? Does every licensed 365 user have MFA enforced, not enabled, which is a whole nother thing to go down, but basically has MFA on it. And we set these into 250 questions, and for our clients, we audit and align these. So we have a TAM, a technical account manager, that visits the client's site once a month and goes through these 250 questions, marking yes or no. And that produces a risk report that we can then share with the client and say, hey, these are the areas where you're weak in. These are some low-hanging fruit, right? Like MFA, there's no cost, there's no licensing, it's built into Office 365. We just need to turn it on. So it's a bit of a disruption to your employees, a bit of training, a learning process, learning curve there, but easy to implement and very effective. So we go through these, identify and address these risks, and some risks, may be marginal. So the business makes the decision that, hey, we'll deal with this for now, or we'll, budget for this in Q1 of next year, and then we'll address it that way. Or sometimes it's a small shift to the workflow can make you more secure. We've noticed in some small businesses, they will put DVRs, so the security systems with cameras and everything, on their main network. And there's been several high-profile attacks. I think it was Target and some other ones in the last couple of years, where these cheap DVRs basically have to be open to the internet so that you can see the security cameras on your phone when you're at home. And because they're open to the internet, the hackers can exploit non-updated software on these DVRs, gain access to the DVR, and now they have a device that's on your network, and now they can intercept traffic. They can go get files, and they can do their damage that way. So little things like that are things that we audit and we align for. We try to catch those. And hey, it's real simple. We can just take the DVR and put it on its own isolated network, so it's not on the same network as your servers, and you can still get it on your phone, and everything still works. And it's just kind of off there by itself. So even if it did get hacked, that the hackers only have access to cameras and they don't get anything else. That's all they can see. And this is kind of the TruTechnology proactive process. This is our slide. And so it starts with that TAM visit that I just described, where we go through our list of 250 questions. We identify some of these risks, basically built off those industry best practices. And then I, as the VCIO, will go back to the leadership team at this small business and say, hey, these are the gaps that we've seen. This is the security, and this is the risks. Here's how we mitigate it. These are what the potential costs might be and the effects to your staff. Let's talk about a plan to mitigate those. I also assist with small businesses when they get their cybersecurity insurance. We've seen a big change in that, right? So cybersecurity insurance used to be when you get it, you just check off, yeah, I have a firewall and yes, I have antivirus. But now they're like 4 or 5 pages long. They want to know if you have, MFA on your RDP sessions. They want to know if you have MFA on your email. Are you pen testing? Are you vulnerability testing? Are you running tabletop security exercises? Are you using, these 5 vendors of antivirus? Because those are the only ones we'll accept. And if you violate any one of those, obviously the policy won't pay out. So I deal a lot with clients and helping them fill out those forms and say, hey, these are the tools that we have in place, and these are the policies and procedures that the small business has in place to make sure that they're protected. And again, it's continuous improvement. It's this iterative process that we just need to go back and forth and make sure that things don't fall out of alignment. Things can happen too, even if we get everything perfectly in place and get all of the tools just right. The hackers come up with a better mouse, right? Or a better mousetrap in that they, get around the MFA with that. If you don't have the number matching, they could just trick you and have you enter the MFA and they man in the middle and they steal it. So things change over time. So now we have to look at number matching. The same thing can happen. Things can just fall out of alignment, not for malicious reasons, but simply like if in our technology support case, if a user is calling in and they have a ticket accessing a particular website, one of the things a technician might do to troubleshoot is, go ahead and whitelist their machine in the firewall just to say, hey, remove all the firewall from their machine just for a second while I check to see if it's the firewall that's blocking this website. And then he gets access to it. And the next thing you know, he goes, okay, you have access to the website. And, they closed the ticket, but they left the machine whitelisted, which now means that machine is not being protected by the firewall. And so that's one of these things, these monthly audits come back and they check for is they say, okay, what is the list of machines that are whitelisted and why are they whitelisted? And if they are, and they have to be for some particular application or some other reason, maybe like the DVR example, we just isolate them to their own network. And so that's why it's important to just keep this process going to audit and align and make sure that we're doing everything we can to mitigate the risks to your small business. So cybersecurity insurance, this is important. I've talked about it before. You can talk with your insurance provider. I would pay, in particular, I would pay attention to the fraudulent ACH transfers portion. I've seen $1 million policies where the insurance only actually covers about $200,000 if it's a fraudulent transfer. And like I said, those are the most common attacks that we see in emails right now. And they're low-hanging, easy for the hackers, and they get big payments just by changing, where you're sending your money for your vendors. So pay attention to that line item. Most cyber insurance will cover restoration of your servers and, any damages and things like that and loss of business. But that particular coverage for the fraudulent ACH transfer tends to be much lower than the overall policy. So it covers all these things: rogue employees, ransomware events, reputation harm. That's another important one to make sure that that's in there just in case, and fraudulent wiring of funds, like I said. So make sure that we get the cybersecurity liability insurance. That's kind of your last line of defense to cover the damage that would be done to your small business after the attack had occurred. And like I said before, we have seen a lot where these are getting more and more complicated, these requirements. They, even to the point where, they are kind of already doing it in health insurance, right? Where in health insurance, they're telling the doctor what procedures and everything that the doctor can do. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, the insurance company is not an MD, right? It's my doctor should be able to dictate that. But they're doing it as well in the cyber liability insurance. They're literally to the IT providers saying that, hey, we only accept these 4 Carbon Black, Cisco AMP, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, those particular Windows Defender endpoint, those particular solutions are the only ones we'll accept, or else we won't, even secure you. So it's almost like they're telling the IT people and dictating to us what our tools should be. And this little checkbox here is just one little section of a cybersecurity insurance form that we had to fill out recently, where they ask about everything that's been implemented in your IT, infrastructure. The application whitelisting is a pretty good one. At TruTech, we use a particular tool that to help prevent malware actually takes this what they call a zero trust approach. So most antiviruses depend on a dictionary. They need a list of whatever the current viruses are, and then that's how they detect and identify them and prevent them. But with zero trust, we actually take a different approach. We basically, like a bouncer at a bar, we just say, okay, look, nobody's allowed in, no program's allowed to run, not even Microsoft Word or Excel. And then we slowly go through and we just say, okay, Word is allowed to run. Okay, Excel is allowed to run. And this gets around these malware and ransomware incidents where, these big cyber criminals get into a room and they basically program their code until it gets by every antivirus, that it's not in anybody's dictionary and can't be detected. But with zero trust, you catch it every time because it's just not on the list, and it never was, no matter what they do to program it. So zero trust and application whitelisting is another good way to protect your endpoints. So this is kind of the iceberg that we've talked about here, as kind of winding down here. There's a lot of stuff that you see above the water that you really should be doing in your small business, and make sure that you're doing. Backup and disaster recovery. There's the old saying in IT, right, that any data you don't have 3 copies of is data you don't care about. And it's important that the disaster recovery and the backups are being tested. I can't tell you how many horror stories I've heard about a client's like, yeah, I got a backup. Yeah, I got a backup. It's green. It's got a little green light right there. And then the ransomware hits and they go to restore their backup, and either the ransomware has encrypted their backup, which ransomwares love to do because they know that your backup is your way out of paying the ransom. So they look for those backups. So it needs to be on a separate system, or even air gapped in the cloud. But they also, sometimes the backups just generally have been failing and no one was monitoring or maintaining that. So at TruTech, even we have a software that boots up the virtual machine of the server. It takes a screenshot of the desktop so that we see that it's live. So it's not just a green button. And then in addition, we do quarterly backup integrity tests that are manual. So we fire up the backups outside of your environment and just verify that we can get to all the data and that they are good. In fact, we do it again right before hurricane season, just so we're super, super sure that if we have to go and recover during even a storm event, that the backups are good and we can recover. Of course, a firewall goes without saying. You need more likely a next-gen firewall, and that includes like IPS and IDS filtering. And that's just a little bit more security, where it's taking a look at all of the packets and trying to decide if there's malicious activity as well in there. You need really the endpoint security. The antivirus is really given way more to a newer term. So like an EDR, so endpoint detection and response, or an MDR, managed detection and response. And both of those can be endpoint related, in that they have like an antivirus kind of client that sticks on your computer, but they're more integrated with some other solutions that are looking at the data and seeing all the different attacks against the computer and able to actually respond. That's the endpoint detection of the virus. And then also the response, where they can holistically in your business shut down one computer before the ransomware spreads from that computer, so they can limit the damage. So you're looking for those EDRs and those MDRs is important next-gen antivirus, really. And then again, email security, multi-factor authentication, an absolute must. If you're doing that, go ahead and set up the number matching that I described on that screen, where Microsoft, after you enter all your information, gives you a number and you have to go enter it on your phone. That'll help with the MFA stealing that a lot of cyber criminals are doing. And then make sure that you're doing patch management across all your systems. Your operating systems are up to date. Your software itself is up to date. Particular lines of business softwares, they don't maybe update as often, but make sure to keep those up to date too, just in case we don't want any latent attacks against those. And then email security training, right? Training for your team, having them recognize when something looks suspicious, having them be suspicious, having that environment of, I'm not going to click that link. I'm going to go ahead and call this vendor on the phone and ask them if they're really changing their account number, or call the employee. We've seen attacks where they pose as an employee from a Gmail account, like it's a personal account, asking them to change their paycheck deposit information. It's crazy the links that these cyber criminals go to. Really disgusting to steal money from hardworking people. and small businesses. And then there's everything that we have below the water. And these are things that really are coming up and things that need to be in place. That top is just your base layer, and everything below the water are additional ways that you can protect your small business. So, vCISO services. So having a virtual chief security officer to talk to you. I kind of merge into that realm in the VCIO, but you can actually have a specialized security officer that will help you run tabletop exercises and help you develop the policy and procedures in your small business, the written component of some of those compliance frameworks. Email encryption itself, and I don't mean the MFA here, I mean actually encrypting the email so that only you and the receiver can read it, and everybody in between can't see it at all. Like it's encrypted, and they have to unencrypt it on their side. Employee monitoring, DNS filtering, security operations centers. These are staffed by human beings, and that's kind of works into that managed detection and response. We actually use a tool where we do have an antivirus that gets installed on the local computer. But in addition to alerting our team, it actually alerts another third-party team that has a security operations center 24/7. And they look at different statuses of either the endpoint detection response or even some access that may have happened in the email, and they kind of put two and two together and they go, okay, look, there's an attack going on because there's a little bit of something suspicious happening on the computer and a little bit of something suspicious happening in the email, and then they can actually shut down either the account for the email or the endpoint itself to prevent anything from spreading further. And then if you travel a lot or you have remote workers, disk encryption, if you lose a laptop, right, that has all your customer data on it, or worse, maybe your competitor gets a hold of your customer list or something like that. So disk encryption on devices that travel outside of the office is a pretty good thing that you can put on that's lower there than the base stuff that we have. So again, in summary, cybersecurity is a big concern for small and medium businesses. You're not too small for them. They'll take any money they can get, and they'll do anything they can low key to trick you out of it. And again, think about it like home building. We've got to design and plan and implement a secure structure, and it's this layered approach. Maybe it was enough at one point to lock the doors, but now you need hurricane-proof windows, or now you need a security system. I got to put cameras in. It is a layered approach, and it's a constant. Auditing and aligning plays into that, where we got to stay ahead, of the bad guys and make sure that we're mitigating all the risk that we can. One of our techs used to say, you got to balance that though, right? One of our techs used to say, you can't spend $100 to protect 5. So it's an approach where you have to recognize the risk that you have, but then evaluate, is it worth it to protect that, or can I just shift my workflow and it's no longer a risk anymore? It mitigates most of the risk, and I'm willing to take that residual risk. Again, it works through the auditing and aligning. That's really the only way to keep on top of it and make sure you're staying ahead of it, and especially in the compliance realm. So hopefully everyone is still awake. I dove a little deep in that one. I apologize, but we can open it up for questions now. Tammy, if you want to start looking through the question. I think we have a few. I see about 13 or so.
Yes. Daniel, one of the questions that we had was, where do I go for cyber insurance? Where do I go?
A lot of your major, line of business and errors and emissions insurance carriers have started to offer a cybersecurity policy, and there's a lot of different policies out there, and different insurance representatives will sell different policies depending on who they're tied to. The one that we really like, that I think is a really good policy, is called Evolve, and it's purely cybersecurity, and usually it's an add-on. It's a whole different line. So if you've got an insurance rep for your small business, I'd ask them about the Evolve cybersecurity insurance. They're really detailed. They've been really good. We've got several of our clients on them. There's been some questionable policies I've seen too. I mean, we've seen, as we go through and we review this for our clients, one of the first things I take a look at is, hey, let me take a look at your policy. And, I found one that was, for $50,000. Well, that's the max of the policy, and it didn't cover fraudulent transfers, and it didn't have any duty to defend language in it. Yeah, it was just too small. So, mostly these policies are riding at about $1 million of coverage. And again, they kind of narrow that a little bit for the fraudulent transfers, just simply because it happens so often. But that Evolve insurance is pretty good stuff. I'd ask your insurance rep about that.
Okay. We also, and this goes to cybersecurity insurance again, what dollar amount of coverage do most small businesses need?
It kind of depends. We've had some of our clients, depending on the vertical that they're in, that need $5 million in coverage because they deal particularly with hospitals and vendors. Most of the policies I've seen across our client base, which is usually about we have some clients at 25 users, and more of them are at 50 to 100. We've seen about $1 million in coverage, usually for cybersecurity.
Okay, and Maria just made a comment on the chat that FCMA, who we're partnering with to do this webinar, has a member that can help with this type of insurance. So if anybody's interested, they just need to email information at fcmaweb.com. And then, Daniel, you were talking a little bit about MFA, multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. And you said something in your presentation about that it's on your Microsoft 365, and most people do have that. Where do they go to look for that if they want to do that today?
There's, you can Google, how do I enable MFA on Office 365? And it'll vary if you have if it's for your business account, there's a little bit of a different portal than if you've signed up for like a personal one. But for the most part, there are instructions on how to do it. And basically, if you go to like portal.microsoft.com and you log in with your username and email, if you are the administrator for your company or the tenant, or you have the admin password, there'll be a control panel there, and you can go through it, and there's some steps to enable it. Be careful when you enable it. Like I said, it is kind of a big switch. So if you've got 20 employees or something, and you turn it on in the middle of the day, right? Suddenly all their emails are going to stop because they're going to have to enter MFA, and they're going to have to get set up. So it's something you might want to plan out a little bit. But if you're a smaller business, 1 to 5, you can just tell everybody, hey, I'm turning on MFA. You're going to have to download the Microsoft Authenticator app to your phone, and then the first time they log in, after you've enabled it, they'll actually get a prompt. It'll put one of those little QR codes up on the screen, and they can just put the Microsoft Authenticator app and scan it with their phone, and it'll set everything up for them. So it's fairly easy to deploy if you're 5, 10 people. If you're 50, it's probably something you want to plan because it can be pretty disruptive.
Okay, and we have one more question up. How often should we be doing employee training for our employees?
Oh, that's a good one. Typically, what we're doing is a monthly phishing campaign. And so there are third-party companies out there that will do phishing campaigns. We include it at TruTechnology. It's a part of our service. It comes in the user price because it's so important. And it's interesting because they'll do various campaigns, as they call them. And there'll be like one for Southwest Airlines. There'll be one for Microsoft, like reset your password. There'll be one for, free ice cream cone or something. They have all these different ones that are kind of designed to trick the employees. And what's interesting is over time, we've seen that the free tickets from Southwest Airlines gets most of everybody. But it even will break it down in a report, and it'll tell you, hey, they opened the email, and then this set of users, somewhat less, click the link, and then this set of users actually put in their information. And then at that point, it schedules them to see a video, a 5-minute video of how to recognize phishing emails. And then you actually get, as a business owner, you get a report that says, okay, I've seen this trend over time that at one point, 50% of my employees were opening the emails, and now it's down to 3%. So you can actually see the training have value over time.
Okay, I know we're running up against time. I have 2 more questions that came up. One's from Steven, and he says, are external SharePoint users a risk? Any good way to manage them?
Yeah, SharePoint is tied in heavily, obviously, to the 365 account. And so there are several obviously the MFA and the number matching MFA just at the top, right? Because it's anything linked to 365, you've got to have that on it. Outside of that, and even on top of that, there are third-party tools that will integrate with Microsoft Office 365 and give you a bit more vision. For instance, we use a tool at TruTech. So built into Office 365, there's something called conditional access. You can actually go into the admin portal and say, okay, if you're accessing SharePoint from China, for instance, I don't have anybody that works in China remote. Forget that. They can't access it. Now, hackers can get around that. In China, they just VPN in Texas and then they access it. So, conditional access isn't the panacea that it should be, but there are third-party tools that layer on and allow you to do like not only conditional access, but remediation. You can actually say, well, if they're, for instance, if they're in Salesforce and they're in Office 365 at the same time, but they're in Salesforce in Texas and Office 365 in China, close both accounts, because there's no way that they can be in two places at once. Or you can set up other conditions too, like if they, passed the MFA recently, if they're also in Florida only. And these third-party tools layer on to really kind of help you narrow down who has access to SharePoint. And then they'll even give you reports too about what are the public files that your corporation or your employees have shared out anonymously. So you can even see what's open on the internet that, maybe they just said share to everybody when they only meant to share it to one person.
Okay. And then just a statement from Jolie. She says, for manufacturers, cybersecurity is part of their ISO ASQMS risk assessment as noted in the standard.
Okay, perfect. I'm not familiar with the ISO yet. I haven't delved deep into that one. There's quite a few models out there and recommendations, but I'd look forward to diving into that one.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been very interesting to hear all of these tips and tricks. And if anybody has additional questions, they can always email me, Tammy, at TruTech.com, and I'll spell my last name, or actually I'll put it in the chat. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for spending the time. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
FCMA wants to thank TruTechnology for presenting today. If anyone has any questions, you can, of course, email information at fcmaweb.com. And we will make sure that our presenters get that follow-up information.